Hello, I'm Kieran, and this is the reading of Chapter 4 of A Silent Kind of Strength by Kitten Crusade on AO3. Chapter 4. The freckled teen had to get up early next morning. Someone on eBay named Good Sir 420 had bought a good portion of the nicer and harder to find Mighty merch. Luckily, he managed to find enough packaging materials from around the house to get everything packaged properly for shipping. He just needed to stop by the post office on his way to school and set it off with a one-fingered salute. He now had a surplus of money to buy what he needed for the creation he had been brainstorming in his new journal. He labeled it Inventions for the Future, Number 1. He had just figured it this way it'd match a bit more when it lined up with his analysis books on his shelves. He had started brainstorming ideas for things that would be a bit more helpful for heroes in the field. At first, he was unsure what to write down that hadn't already been rehashed 100 times before. But then he remembered all the notes on gear updates that he had already jotted down in his analysis work. From there, it's just a matter of figuring out how to bring his vague ideas on helpful things into a solid plan of components and design. He needed to remember to grab some engineering books when he went to the library this weekend. He settled the stack of packages in his arms and he locked the door to the apartment. The trip downstairs was a bit difficult with the heavy load setting him off balance, but he managed to make it with only one near misstep. He was lucky the post office was only a few blocks away. He probably would have to make it 2 trips if it was farther. As he struggled to open the door, a nice man stepped in to help, lightly scolding him for trying to carry so much at once. Yeah, that probably wasn't his best idea. But he made it to the counter without dropping a single thing, so he will take the trip as a win. The postal worker was surprisingly quick in her work, weighing and labeling with a large stack at the spot of the counter, with sure movements and direct questions. Obviously wanting to get him out the door as soon as possible so she could get back to the large cup of coffee he had seen steaming by the computer behind her. Coffee. Now there was an idea. 10 minutes when she had him rang up and done with his errand, he bowed his head slightly and wished her a good day. He did have extra time. Yup. Coffee. If he remembered correctly, there was a small coffee shop only a little ways out his way to school. Now was as good a time as any to treat himself. He headed that way, a good mood, thinking about what kind of pastries they might have. He was lucky. The little cafe wasn't as busy yet this early in the morning, though that probably changed within the next 30 minutes or so as kids started making their way to class and adults to work. Izuku wandered over to the frankly massive pastry case beside the front counter. There were the usual basics like wagashi, simple cakes. There also looked like a lot of foreign sweets, things like breads and donuts. So many choices, so little time. Maybe he should come here more often so he could try them all. He would have to add in more time running to his schedule to make up for the calorie intake, though. The middle-aged man in front of him moved away to wait his order as a young woman behind the counter turned to Izuku. "Good morning, what can I get for you?" she cheerfully asked, sea green curls bouncing in her dark face. "Oh, he floundered, looking back at the case and trying to decide what he wanted. He was about to randomly point in panic before a low voice sounded from beside him. "The bear claws are good." He looked over his shoulder in surprise. Green eyes met purple, and his brain went from whirling to a sudden stop. Tall, square jaw, fluffy purple hair. Very distracting. He tried to fight his blush away from his face while simultaneously kicking his brain as hard as he could in hopes that it would turn back on. But bear claws? Great. Staring and stuttering. Perfect first impression. The teen behind him nodded and pointed at the pastry case. "It's filled with almond paste. Not too sweet, but not too savory. They call it that because the shape it makes when it bakes." He curled his long, pale fingers into a claw shape, knuckles curled and spread apart as it held up beside the glass. Wow, he has nice hands. Another kick to the brain was needed. The pastry did kind of look similar, and besides, the name made him think of Kachan, so of course it would be good. He nodded decisively and tore his eyes away from the gravity-defying purple to turn back towards the barista. May I have a bear claw with a mocha latte, please? The woman giggled and typed it on the computer. She then glanced between Izuku and the other teen and wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. His face flushed red, freckles standing out against the bright color. Well, he did have some extra cash. He gathered his courage and gestured toward the other boy. What would you like? He met with a sleepy blank stare. What? It was really nice for you to help me, he tried to explain, reaching out to fiddle with one of his curls, unconsciously pulling it to try to hide his hearing aids more. Let me get yours today, okay? Now the purple-haired boy looked confused, but he shrugged. Okay. I guess another bear claw and a large black coffee, then? Izuku nodded and turned back to the bubbly barista who's already typing in the order, grinning ear to ear. After he paid, the two of them stepped aside to wait for their order. The shorter teen fidgeting nervously with his curls, glancing up at the other's rather tired-looking face. I'm Izuku Midoria. He trailed off, unsure if the other even cared to know his name. It was just a random person who he happened to interact with at a cafe. Intense purple shifted his way lazily. Shinso Hitoshi. The smaller boy grunted and ran his hand through his own hair. Thanks, I guess, for the, treating. He trailed off as he seemed to lock onto the small bit of plastic stuck directly into Izuku's ears. Oh, he mumbled, and the brunette felt his heart sink, trying to ready himself for an insult. Then, Shinso lifted his hand and began to sign. Are you more comfortable signing? He spoke and signed at the same time. Izuku stared at this taller teen for a moment in complete shock. You sign? Shinso nodded and replied, It's easier than speaking sometimes. Freckled hands practically shook with excitement as he tried not to gush too much. I've never met someone my age who can sign. He gave a little bounce. Shinso tilted his head curiously. Yeah, only like 2 kids in my school can understand me enough to translate. Luckily, a couple of my teachers learned enough that I can communicate when I need to. Izuku beamed. That's so cool. No one at my school signs. It kind of gets hard when I don't have my hearing aids. Shinso frowned a bit, wondering why the smaller boy would be without something he obviously relied on heavily. But before he could ask, their order was being called out, and the greenette skipped towards grabbing their breakfast and drinks. As he was handing the second bear claw and black coffee, Izuku felt a small pang of sadness. This had been the most positive interaction he had had outside of self-defense class in ages. He really wanted to keep talking to Shinso, but he didn't want to annoy him, so he resigned himself to walking slowly and eating his pastry well before he could get too close to the school. But then Shinso gestured to the empty tables, an eyebrow raised. Izuku beamed. He couldn't be too much of a mess of things if the other was offering to sit with him. He hurried towards the seat and made sure he didn't spill his coffee as he sat down at the table. They settled in, phones on the table in front of them so they could keep an eye on the time. Freckled hands only shook a little as they pulled a bit off the pastry to pop in his mouth. Green eyes sparkled at the taste. It was delicious, perfect to go with his coffee. He hastily sighed another thank you at the table mate for helping him choose his breakfast. That seemed to break the ice, and they spent the next 20 minutes chatting about little things like what their favorite snacks were. Izuku learned his new acquaintance liked things that straddled in the gap between savory and sweet. That he went to middle school a good deal farther away from here, but he started classes a little later, and he had a slight obsession with cats. After a short time, though, it had come to an end. Shinso had to leave and catch his train. He signed a quick goodbye and stood to leave, stretching an arm over his head, giving a blushing brunette a peek of pale skin and back dimples, with a yawn, and then turned to scoop up his bag. As he made to leave, Midoriya shot up from his own seat. Wait, could I, do you want to exchange numbers? Shinso turns back to him, purple eyebrows raised in panic as he continued. We could send each other cat memes? Are you trying to get my number by bribing me with cats? I think so. Fair enough. Give me your phone. As Izuku raced towards his school 5 minutes later, it was with a phone number and a cute boy added to his small contacts list. He should have known his good day would be over the moment he set foot in the school. The smell of smoke drifting through the air was the only warning he got before a fist made contact with his face, sending him to the cold tile floor of the hallway. Kachan was back, and he had something to prove. "Shitty Deku, why are you here, ruining our school with how useless you are? And you have the nerve to be smiling the first thing in the fucking morning?" The next few minutes were a blur of him trying to discreetly cover the vulnerable spots from kicks, cuts, and burns as his classmates spent the slot before the bell, making up for lost time. From the few glances he was able to see, the Kachan looked horrible. Bags under his eyes and face pale and sweaty, like he was still sick. He probably was still sick and just too stubborn to stay in bed anymore. That didn't bode well for Izuku. A sick Bakugo Katsuki was a violent Bakugo Katsuki. With a sigh, he peeled himself off the floor and just barely managed to make it to his seat before the teacher walked in. The rest of the day goes about the same. Bakugo coughing up nastiness and then taking his frustration on Midoriya. Breaks and lunch were hell. Forget eating the sandwich he had packed, it just ended up being trampled on the playground by the feet of the posse that had hunted the Quirkless boy down. By the time the final bell rang, the Greenette knew he would finally have to ask his mom to replace his uniform. He started planning his excuses on why he needed one so soon. He didn't even try to run with the bell. He was too sore and too tired to even outpace the other kids. The teacher traipsed away, blatantly ignoring the eager and ugly looks being sent towards the small child he was supposed to protect. About half the class left as well, mostly the ones afraid of being the next target, but the half that was left was waiting for the cue from their head honcho. Kachan stood and turned towards his favorite target. Guess it's time for his practice. The beating was ugly. They hadn't even tried to stay away from his face this time either. Great. Luckily, Inko had a full week of doubles scheduled. After the last of Bakugo's Katsuki sauntered out of the door, gushing about the new arcade that opened up, Izuku slowly sat up and felt his nose. Running his fingers gently along the bridge, he decided it probably wasn't broken. Which was good, because setting broken noses hurt like a butt cheek on a stick in his experience. It was bleeding pretty good, though. With a sigh, he pinched it with the sleeve of his Gakkaran. Getting to his feet was a bitch. At least one of his ribs was cracked. Everything else was bruised or burned, and he had a long cut up his bicep and another across the lower back. He gathered up his stuff as quickly as his aches and pains would let him and started to hobble home. He needed the bigger first aid kit they had in the bathroom. He had decided to take the long way. He wasn't bleeding too quickly, and it would be easier to take the quieter streaks than the busier way and have some good Samaritan call the cops for him. It wouldn't do any good. As soon as he handed them his ID and they saw his quirk registry, they would have some good excuse on why not to deal with him. A waste of time. As he stumbled along, he texted Kachan, "Hey, I won't be in today. Got punched in the face and my nose won't stop bleeding." Close enough to the truth that when he showed up tomorrow, they wouldn't question his black eyes. She replied as he was glaring down at the flight of stairs leading to his apartment. "Are you okay? Did you hit them back?" Izuku smiled a bit, regretting that his face stung, and lined, "You know it." With that, he struggled his way up the accursed stairs, cursing his nose and his ribs. It took about half an hour to patch himself up. The cut across his back was a bitch to clean and bandage. Luckily, with all the practice he had done, the rest of the injuries were easy to deal with. He was in too much pain to really be hungry, so he snagged a granola bar on the way to his room. As settled carefully into the bed he munched, a small stack of high school textbooks sat beside his pillows. After a moment of thought, he sent his mom a text to let her know that he was going to bed early and laid down to read. Reading wouldn't aggravate anything, and this still counted as studying, so he wouldn't be off his schedule. Izuku was ready for a long night. After all is said and done, thank you for listening.